The words I just said might be cut off. Who knows? Not doing the starting up screen. Um, I'm gonna watch and make sure everything's starting and that the audio's okay. I'm gonna watch and make sure everything's starting. Excellent. And that the audio's okay. Let's see what's going on YouTube. See that it started there. That was Twitch. Looks like it has. The words I just said might be cut off. Who knows? Excellent. All right. Well, I can play that, do that. You know, there's people that are going to complain about this, even though it's totally normal. J. Troy, will you have an alert system or something, or is that just a bot? Are you a bot? Or do you have a bot? As you can see down below, somebody's typed some stuff a while ago, actually, and I hadn't noticed in the broadcast text, so they're getting a free advertisement for their pirate radio station. Say it's a real pirate radio station. Gonna have to give that a listen or something. And if I find it inappropriate, we will not let that stand. So I saw a video of Gary's, and he hasn't been putting videos on YouTube, and I don't check his site. What can I say? I watched it, and he mentioned this video, no, that video over there, that he'd made responding to some old video of mine, and I was watching it at double speed for about 10, 15 video minutes, so about 7 minutes, and I thought, I'm just going to use this as a reason to broadcast, because as you guys know, I've been wanting to broadcast more often, but I don't. So now the arrangement of the screen is optimized for my utility. Gary, just starting off here. Nobody does this with their web pages anymore. It's annoying. Use the margins of the browser. We don't need all this 1994 brushed metal look or whatever it is. Just put a little at the edge or something if you really, really love it. Okay, please? Would you? Luckily, the player knows how to make up for your mistake. Oh, I wasn't going to listen at double speed here. Oh, maybe I was only listening at 1.75 speed. Or maybe I lowered it for this. All right, so hopefully, I'm totally ready to bail on this if it gets ridiculous. And the line of ridiculousness is not calling any of my ideas or ideas that I attribute to others or calling those names or anything. But, and it's not exactly insults, but certain kinds of insults that is why I haven't even been watching your videos, because I would consider going to your website in the past based on the fact you're doing it for a reason. Am I too loud? Okay, J. Troy, I don't mean to have accused you of being a bot, but you always say hello like as soon as I can check it. So I won't dig deeper into why you see those alerts right away, but good for you. I don't wish, I specifically don't listen to all the alerts. I have no idea when my phone beeps what app it is, and if I can, I'll delete it. So it's a skill. All right, so we're gonna watch this and just hope. We're gonna hope for the best. Obviously, Gary's not going to be saying he admits that I was right all along, so we know that. All right, so let's just start playing it. I have my whiteboard down there, but it's kind of awkward because I have to switch it. It's on the same screen as the, for me, I have to write on the same screen as this video.
UnderdrivePhysics.com video presentation. some more two-slit stuff. I had a comment on the website message board, and it was just some raggy thing about how I'm going to be proven wrong, and I'm wrong, and I'm blah blah blah, and I'm wasting my time, and I'm just a flat earther, and all of that crap, all unsigned. And then
Oh, I can't start it with
referencing
the space
2008,
bar.
arguments as if they had any relevance or meaning, frankly, in terms of how much the argument has evolved. In terms of anyone watching these videos, sort of knows that we've all learned something, right? I've learned, and anyone watching the videos has learned that there's a certain dynamic here. There's certain facts, and they're quite relevant in terms of the conversation hasn't included any of those facts. The conversation about the two-slit experiment last 200 years doesn't include any conversation about those important facts. It's the sort of undeniable the significance of them in terms of making it clear that certain theories don't work, that certain ways of representing what the phenomenon is are invalid. They can be deduced to be invalid. The waves are in the wrong place.
Deduced.
Kind of established as a fact that only a flat earther could deny, kind of thing.
A theme in this is going to be, and I've noticed this lately with Snake Plisskenist and Bravo, but is this idea that your logical deductions are allowed to veto the evidence of the senses because they don't make sense. I mean, there's truth in that if by not making sense you have evidence and an alternate way to interpret them. But a good example of this would be Zeno's paradox, old paradox. There's a bunch of them, but one's about crossing the road. You can't cross the road because to get to the other side, you have to go halfway. And then you have to go halfway of what's left. And there's an infinite number of halfways, so you can never get there. Things like that were convincing arguments. It still are to some people. Like, what? How does it work? Can you go through infinite points in a finite amount of time? Infinite requires infinite and things like that. And it's like the old joke that the guy said that the bumblebee can't fly according to the laws of thermodynamics. Since the bumblebee flies, the point is the laws of thermodynamics have a problem, right? So if you have an empirical thing that's not explained, it's an open field, green field. Go ahead and do it. All right. I have to move my mouse to do this.
Somebody who just wishes to evade the truth can deny. So, these people, they're saying that, they have math, and I'm saying, yes, it's fine.
And I hope somebody else in the world appreciates the sort of postmodern irony or essence where Gary's responding to a video of mine that's from way long ago, pausing my video and responding, and I'm responding to him while he's doing that. And what's the deepest chain of this that has ever happened? I mean, I would like it to be hundreds of levels deep. Okay, so Gary said that the two-slit experiment, he just said 200 years. So this is the kind of thing where he'll go, don't you even know how many years? I didn't think it was quite 200, I have to admit. Okay, I won't make you wait. Let's just go. 200 years, fine.
Let's just understand that everybody doing the two-slit experiment on the internet isn't using that math. So until you can show a video of somebody actually using the math you're saying that's accurate, you don't really have an argument. And then on top of that, you don't have an argument because, yes, there is math that works, but that math doesn't have anything to do with wave theory being right. It has exactly the opposite. It has to do with the fact that, surface theory is right, because that's what that math will use. And it's doing it the long way around, in my opinion, because what do we have learned? Okay, so let's go over some of what we have, how much the conversation has evolved since 2008, and, Piro's glib, superficial, mushy, no, it ain't so, it's all right, I was taught right. So in the first place, there's two different patterns. One you call a single slit pattern, one you call a double slit pattern. The distinctive feature of the double slit pattern is that it has two patterns, essentially. One that could be called an envelope pattern, and then a pattern inside of that, little tiny bits inside of a bigger pattern. And
for fuck's sake.
The envelope is essentially a single slit pattern superimposed in a sense.
Wait, okay, we're pausing. Be back soon. Okay. All right. Love you too. Bye bye. Hello. Sorry about that, everybody, but my lovely wife is traveling. One of the reasons I'm doing this, probably. And, she takes priority. Sorry.
Double slit pattern. So the double slit pattern would
Not
be
really
little
sorry.
nodes, and the single slit envelope, okay, would be where the little nodes become invisible. All right, we've learned that the basic dynamic that makes that happen, I mean, it's just kind of an absolute fact, is the geometry, right? You're just making, triangles. You're saying, can I create a path length difference? Well, if I make this D really small, you can't create any path length differences, right?
Yeah,
The two
you
lines are
can.
always going to be the same length no matter where you
No,
go if you're going from the same point. So if I eliminate 2 points by making the slits really thin, I
they're
make this
still
impediment in
different.
the middle really thin, I'm effectively getting rid of 2 surfaces. I'm getting rid of 2 points that could have created a difference, but they can't anymore because there's no base to the triangle. And so the base of the triangle is dictating what you're seeing. And what is, I'm going to argue an absolute fact, is this widest distance between 2 surfaces, a very big triangle, that's creating the little bars. Because you have lots of wavelengths between this distance, and each dot represents a wavelength change. It represents a in phase, out of phase, in phase, out of phase, in phase, out of phase. And so whatever the number of wavelengths that fits between that distance will tell you exactly how many nodes you have. Now what we've learned is the nodes going horizontal, just because of the rules of geometry, are bigger, and the ones straight up are smaller. So it's not as simple as just saying, okay, the number here, I'll just divide the wavelength into this number and just make 500 little, I'll segment 500 marks on an arc that has the length, the radius of the circle, so to speak. And I'll be done. And so it's not as simple as that, but you have to account for the fact that it takes more angular change to create a node, okay, horizontally than it does vertically. The other thing we've learned is that there's really 2 starting points. There's this slit to this slit and this slit to this slit, and there's 2 starting points. And now everything happening in the middle here is smaller than the width of that impediment, which is going to be something like 1/10 of a millimeter. So obviously everything happening inside of that is irrelevant because it's just a tiny dot on the screen far, far away. So there's no notion that these 2 lengths.
Okay, here is the equation for diffraction. Now, the diffraction effect, when you see the diffraction lines, oh, it didn't like that? Oh, I see. Because this is in this mode. Because your stupid player sucks. Just kidding. So, this is the equation for diffraction, sorry, distraction. Freudian slip. This is the equation. I'm trying to talk slower and say more basic things for diffraction. Now, when you see diffraction lines, it is from interference. It's from self-interference. And the whole thing about the Huygens principle is that the whole wave is having this self-interference pattern all the time. It's just when the wave is, really long or infinite, the wave front rather, um, it keeps reinforcing itself, without gaps, without the dark lines. But when you cut off part of the wave, then the fact that every little point is coning out, is expanding, creates this, and you could calculate it mathematically. But the amount of spread, right, how big the cone is dependent on the wavelength, right? And when the wavelength lines up, as you can see from this equation, d is the distance between the slits, between the edges of the slits, I assume, the diffraction angle, and the order number for the maximum and the wavelength, you can see that the diffraction angle is going to be the arc sine of n lambda over d, right? So the relationship between the slit size and the wavelength, when n means a whole number of wavelengths is in there, it's going to be the biggest when when the slit is near the size of the wavelength. And that's just what controls it, based on 2 things. One, the formula from an application of, Huygens and all the other wave mechanic equations, and 2, from experimental evidence of water waves, light waves, all kinds of waves. Just a little primer.
lengths are equidistant, therefore the center is on. It doesn't work that way. The center is actually an off, and you don't start till you get to here, and then you have to measure this distance and see if it's in phase or out of phase. And depending on the width, it can be in phase or out of phase. And so what you're going to observe, what Stephen Bro even pointed out or demonstrate is this is always an odd number here where the node is, and this is always a whole integer, these node sizes. So you can have a node size of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but this will always be an odd number. So it's skipping.
I thought this was about me.
And
did I click on the wrong one?
3 here and 3 here, and if you push those 2, 3 into each other, I guess I could have drawn that the center maxima being larger is essentially explained as one node being.
And I watched this before this part,
that's
so
why this is always an odd number here.
Maybe I was distracted. I didn't realize he was.
And they can be merged by a lot or merged by a little, so you can have this
is
center maxima
very
be,
important. I should be
something more or something less than.
Paying
a little bit
total
more or a little bit
attention,
less than
taking
twice the
notes,
size.
getting the numbers, counting. He's
those
got
are the
5
real points
little
of this.
dots,
This
1
is
big dot, 3 little
dictated by the
dots,
geometry.
1
That
big
one
dot.
we both should agree on that we're really just talking about drawing lines and vectors and seeing which line is longer, and you can't deny the geometry.
I have to remember I'm
Small
here to
distance
listen.
creates
Just
very
here
few
to
opportunities
listen.
for
I don't
on,
have
off,
to.
on, off. And a big distance between points, a big base on the triangle, creates a lot of opportunity for on, off, on, off. And that's really what these two patterns are. So what you're really doing is just superimposing. When you combine these two slits, you're starting off with two surfaces that are creating a pattern, okay, of difference, triangles. And you're basically going to change that.
I wish that was a wax pen.
Okay, I'll draw it this way. All right, so you have two surfaces, and you're going to merge those surfaces, and you're going to create these new triangles. You're going to create triangles.
Gary,
here.
I have to admit,
Okay,
you
you're gonna create a
hold
triangle
your
here. Those are new
marker
triangles
a lot
that
like
you're
a
creating. So when you merge them, you're really
professor, an
changing it
autistic
substantially in the
professor,
sense that you're adding
which
more
is the
point
best
sources.
kind of
And the
professor,
fact
of
is
course.
that the light, when you add the extra, when you merge two patterns, you don't get twice as much light. You get 4 times as much light because you have 4 more sources of reconstruction to remake photons.
No.
So
Let me
simple
stop
argument
right
is
there.
very
Okay,
few
this
traditions
is
say
not
two
really
surfaces.
that important. But the thing is, here's the deal. There is no 4 point sources. Gary's confused. Gary won't understand this, but for everybody else. Here's the thing. When you have a slit, the Huygens principle says you take all the infinite points along the wave that gets through the slit, you act like they're little point sources, meaning there's ripples out, right? And then for every next second of the wavefront, or millisecond or nanosecond, you calculate all those ripples, where do they add up? Now, again, if it's a really long line, the math just keeps a straight wavefront moving. But as we know, if it's a point source, it ripples out in a circle. So they all add up in such a way that they cancel out outside a little cone of the diffraction, right? And basically what's happening is when they hit it, the wavefront hits in wave mechanics, ignoring the duality thing, when you cut off a part of the wave, so the wave's coming and a lot of it's cut off, the edges is where you start to see the fan out. And the dark of all of the wave that would have been there if there was no slit, it's missing. And that is the source of the dark bands, is that it spreads out with a limited amount of energy in the wave, light or whatever the wave is. It spreads out, and obviously there's dark patches, which is the light in the only available energy that's fanning out, and happens to do it in this way where there's cancellation in wave mechanics, right? So that's why it's interference. Now, the thing is, it's very complex to add up an infinite number of points. And do you do the nanosecond or the second? If you use a computer, mathematically, very hard just to make an equation of what's the wavefront going to be like at a certain distance, right? So a simplification of that is that most of that wavefront, the effects all cancel out, and you can see it as though there was an influence from the two edges where the darkness starts. So there's an approximate. So in math, doing the actual equation with an infinite number of little point sources along the line segment, there's a simplification that's a very good approximation, which is the 2 wave points at the end. However, if you ever do this, you'll go ahead and do 100 points, because that's a little bit better And you can do 1,000 or 100 or even 1,000,000 without too much cost. So if you're running a simulation, that's what you would do. There's no 2-point sources. It's just that the baseline approximation is similar to as if there were 2-point sources, I believe, of darkness on the edges. Right? So it's just a shortcut so you can make the calculation. It's not exact, it's not in principle, it's not mechanical. So when you have 2 slits, it's not 4 sources. That's bullshit. It's just that there's an approximation that's pretty good. The way to get like the first cut approximation that's fairly good, fairly much represents the pattern you're going to see, would be with those 4 sources. Yeah, I guess they're positive sources in this when used this approximation actually. And it's still better if you calculate 1,000,000 little sources along each of the slits, making 2,000,000 total. That would be better. The best of all is to do it for infinite. But that could take a long time to calculate on a computer. And infinite terms is really difficult on paper. Man, I turned the heat up too high.
That's where the
it's hot in here.
From. That never works. Okay, that theory
My
doesn't
ground
work.
floor.
And it can only work if they annihilate 2 of the surfaces and turn it back into the single slit. It'll never explain the double slit. You can't explain the double slit with this one distance. It will not do it. Can't work. You won't explain this pattern. Because it's just a fact that they, even in the center, even in the single slit, let's understand, their own admission, their own concession, okay, is that this is the distance between the 2 surfaces. That's the base of their geometric triangle. That's the point sources. So they're already conceding the argument that the surfaces are the center of the wave. So if you're going to draw it accurately, you can't put the wave here in the middle. You have to put the wave right here on the surface. And that's the
I swear to God, I didn't remember this part.
That's paying any attention.
I guess it's when he finally gets to my old video, I went, I should watch this on a stream.
Because it's all perfectly accurate.
I'm not vouching that we should be watching this part.
The surfaces are the sources. There's just no denying it. This won't work.
There is denying it.
Drawing doesn't work. It will never create the double slit pattern. At best, it can create a synthetic and inaccurate single slit that will be missing this double maxima. This double maxima is not created by that math. It can only be created synthetically by them changing the rules and saying, we're not going to count the first node. We're going to call it 0 instead of a 1. And then when they're doing the double slit, they call it
You
a 1.
don't know what you're talking about. Gary doesn't know what he's talking about. He hasn't done any of the math. He doesn't understand the math. This is pointless. Sorry, you guys.
But the fact is that this simple drawing will not.
I almost feel like I saw a different video.
It won't get the right answer.
Doesn't he? I thought he was going through an old video of mine. That's what made this interesting.
Okay, how the conversation has evolved since 2008. When I was just basically complaining about any kind of silly notion that some photon comes
Just kidding. I know. This is the end point, according to Gary, and now we're going to go back 14 years and see what it was like 14 years ago when we were arguing the same thing. Now wait, before you guys,
how superficial it is.
Before you guys go, why are you still discussing something from 14 years ago where you already made your point and haven't had to adapt it? Well, it turns out everything is controversial, children, and it also turns out that not only is everything controversial, but conversations go on for thousands of years. That's what philosophy really is about. We're discussing things that you can literally find the written down conversations of thousands of years ago in many, many cases. Now, sometimes you could disagree that the old conversation on consciousness was really, got close enough to the point. But, there's the roots of it in many, many cases. Many, many cases. Certainly, 14 years is not that long to be arguing something with someone who doesn't accept the last 100 years of physics. That's how I think of it. I don't think of it as 200 years. But Gary's probably right. It was 200 years. Okay, anyway, let's get back to... Oh, look, I think this is where it starts. 11 minutes, yeah, and then I was like at 4 minutes in, which would have been 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes of listening. And then I thought, hey, let's make a stream.
No, it's just because this asshole's arguing that somehow this debunks me, that somehow Piro made some argument that somehow hasn't been completely explained and argued against and, pointed out to be superficial and inaccurate to the truth. When, of course, it has, repeatedly.
Hi, Gary. You're frustrating. But I do sort
So let's just understand the context is, yeah, I'm frustrated because assholes like you just say it's pseudoscience. Don't make any arguments against your conventional garbage model. And as I've pointed out, I've got huge piles of
well,
evidence
I mean,
compiled
this
now
video
pointing out how the
itself
kinetic energy theory
is.
is a bunch of wooey religious crap. And it's overtly religious crap. The origin of it is completely
Maybe you guys don't want to listen to two people talk at once. It's possible to hear both, but I'll pause. This video is from a long time ago, Gary, and it's it's not really open to debate what the positions have been, right? Aren't you demonstrating that my position has been consistent while yours has changed? I'm fine with yours changing, but you try to make this a gotcha uh, against the woo woo, and it's you that's out on a limb. You're the one that's developing a system that changes constantly. I didn't develop this system, right? I'm not a physicist. I was just shown certain things that seemed proved to me, and I'm relaying them.
a religious argument. Your physics is too, Newton is too atheist. Descartes is too atheist. Even though Descartes was a Jesuit. So because it didn't meet somebody's religious expectations, they forced it. And that's all it ever was a force. All the evidence has been contrived, and you don't really have any. Okay, here we are in
Nice
modern
try.
era, and you still can't produce a single link to a single experiment demonstrating that a 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour has twice as much energy as a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour. Nothing.
Sort of like talk. You have to read the scientific literature. It has not all been translated into YouTube. If you think that that's something that should happen, let me tell you something, Gary. We're not at the end of history where everything that should happen has happened. And you can make those videos, right? But you choose instead to make up your own system that you haven't done any experiments for or anything. And you can marvel at how can they not have thought of this for all these hundreds of years? Maybe 200 years is about kinetic energy. I don't know. But they have been working on it. We have been convinced. You could say, hey, you were convinced by a fake thing, a fallacy that misdirects you. But you haven't exactly said that, because to do that, you would have to demonstrate that with your own experiments. I see you all the time complaining, other people, you didn't do an experiment, Stephen Broman. But you haven't done an experiment. How can you cast that as an aspersion when you haven't done it? I love, working class, real world.
Yeah, just bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. You're patronizing douchebag. That's what
You're a patronizing douchebag. I am an overly tolerant, nice bag.
you are. Patronizing douchebag. Yes, you're not one of us because you went to Berkeley.
Now, at the time of this video, I had not disclosed that to anybody. I eventually disclosed it because we had been talking for like 6 years, and I'm like, here's where I learned what I'm relaying to you as the conventional concept. I don't agree with it, so I will identify where it came from. Just like Gary, you have identified, oh, I've watched a lot of YouTube and other stuff. I've looked for everything and MIT courses and all of this stuff. You're are you trying to brag? Yes, probably. But let's just say you're not trying to brag. You're telling us where your idea came from. That's what I was doing, especially since I didn't agree with everything that I was taught in college. So when I was going, hey, no, this is not, wait, stop. This is what conventional logic or physics says. Here's what I think, or here's where my open mind lies. And so I'm telling you where the idea came from. Why? Just to disclose it to you. Because we're in a conversation. We're in a conversation, and disclosing to you where my information came from. If I'm like, hey, my uncle taught me, you should know that. It doesn't mean it's not good, that my uncle could have been a genius or whatever. But it's a part of the discussion after years and years and years, right? I never have bragged. Look, I'm still talking to you. What are you talking about? The fact that I'm still talking to you somewhat reluctantly, but whatever, all of this time shows Do you think I'm talking? I don't even know where you went to college or if you went to college. I have no idea. I've never asked you. It's never come up. Why are you bringing it up? But yeah, I went to Berkeley. I took the same schedule that a math or science major would take for 2.5 and 3 years. 2.5 on physics, 3 before I stopped the math. I got to upper division. I never intended to get that as my degree. And, your last year and a half, you got to focus on your degree, which in my case was philosophy because I like studying logic. It turned out I like that degree. That's not the degree I intended to get when I went there, but upon experimentation, I found out I like logic. So I wanted to take all the philosophy courses that I could. But about half of them had to be learning what philosophers have said in the past. But a lot of those guys are also into logic. So it was interesting. Does it mean I'm right? If it meant I was right, I wouldn't even be talking to you. Dude, you got your own crazy philosophy of science that it's just yours. Nobody else has it. I'm curious in it because it's interesting to me. Why? Because I like weird shit. That's the only reason.
You know, a college that you might as well call it a Jesuit school. It's just woo all over the place.
So even though you get a little bit weird in certain areas, that's okay. I can handle it.
So wait, Berkeley was a Jesuit school? Look, you've never, as far as I know, you've never even been to the town of Berkeley. But as with science, you understand exactly what Berkeley is like. Well, Berkeley's a lot more conventional than you realize, I guess. But also, look at you, you're flipping me off 14 years in the past. Not right now. I mean, I don't take that personal right now. This is you flipping me off a few days ago, but not me right now, me 14 years ago. Because 14 years ago, I still triggered you. Sad, Gary.
But first of all, there's nothing phantasmagorical about my approach to this. Okay.
Yeah, your approach is even less than. It shouldn't even get the word phantasmagorical because that requires things like building a flying car or something, right? That's what the word is from. Yeah, the phantasmagorical.
Is it? I did not know that.
Oh, chitty chitty bang bang. So forget it.
Didn't know
You're not
that.
even doing that. You're not doing anything. Okay, it's all just fluff. It's all just talk, and there's absolutely zero.
Well, everything you're saying is fluff in the sense that there's not even one experiment. You claim there's no experiments behind conventional physics, but we disagree. And we have the data and the results, and you could go find it out. Some of it does take some money to get all the details and the files and stuff, or if you want up-to-date information, and you might have to pay for a scientific journal or something. But mostly for this old stuff, you don't. Now, you find it hard to find on the internet. Well, that's because it's not indexed well, because most people don't want to read primary information. And you're one of those people. This is getting frustrating.
Substance.
I was taught about this, the two-slit experiment by physicists.
Right. No, you were taught the same way every other student was taught. Okay, open your textbook and read the Babel. Okay, and now.
No, we also did labs. We also had to solve equations to see if the lab data we'd just done matched it. So you're wrong about how college works. College physics doesn't work the way you think.
Days they might show a little bit of a Feynman clip or some other horseshit, and it's all superficial. And as I've already illustrated over and over again by playing their actual videos, it doesn't take into account the real pattern. That is, you don't really account for the double maxima, you don't account for the two pattern and the envelope pattern.
No, what that's all about is you don't understand the mathematics, and your math for poets description is polluted with confirmation bias.
None of that is even discussed in 90% of the talking head videos. They don't even account for. They don't even say the word envelope because they're not really.
But the 10% that do are, I guess, helping you out. The envelope is just a concept. I mean, in the math, every point has either a cancellation or, whatever wave overlap value. Some points oscillate, and some points their oscillation keeps the actual wave at a particular point, and it's point by point. It's not three envelopes or two envelopes or four sources or two. That's what humans put on it to solve it with an approximation, or to even describe it, hypothetically, in the perfect case, if you want to try to calculate that as close as possible.
Playing in the real two-slit game field here. They're playing with just words and some magical experiment.
You're playing with words. Now, I noticed some other video recently where you were doing a little bit of experiments. That's nice. I like to see that. I've been encouraging that for many, many moments.
In mythology. They're not talking about the actual experiment and what it actually does.
They are.
Some of the best physicists in the world, and I'm not going to say where. I was going to school at the time.
Yeah, we already know it's Berkeley.
No, you don't already know. You know now. Now is the future compared to this video. At the time of this video, I had not said, because I didn't even originally want to say where I was on Earth, but I did want to make videos outside, and people started guessing, and I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to be coy about it. I'm in Hawaii. But I did not say the education. You know why? Because I like to talk to people like you that are uneducated, as well as people that are educated. I like talking to all of the above. If I'm at a party, I will talk to any of the people that want to talk about physics, regardless, or philosophy, or any of the subjects I'm interested in. And if you have your own physics, like theory, then I find that interesting as well. So I did not want to tell people where some of my concepts of what conventional thought is came from. Why am I saying what conventional thought is? Where would I get that? From the scientific press? That's not a good representation. A lot of people, that's where they get it. From the YouTube, like you. No, and so I thought it was only fair to disclose that I had gotten my idea about the mainstream or conventional view of what scientists believe from my education, my classes in physics, as well as my classes in math, insofar as that's related, at Berkeley. So I said that, and here I am still talking to you. And if I had been presenting that as some sort of slam dunk, then why would I be doing that? Also, in other videos, I had said how I didn't agree with everything that I was taught. Plus, many other students that I went to school with don't all have the same position as me. I was in discussion groups and discussion clubs and discussion events, and I found that everybody being educated at the university did not have the same perspective or the same understanding of what they were being taught. So even if we all agreed and to absolutely stick by what we were taught, we still all thought different things because we actually had a different impression about what we were taught. Plus, a lot of people were people like me that maintained skepticism that, hey, this is the narrative, the best narrative that the academics all together can agree to teach us in a curriculum. But there's a lot of other narratives, and sometimes you're taught by a professor that says, I believe with this. I mean, I disagree with this. I believe something else. But right now I'm teaching physics, 207, and this is the accepted concept right now. Right? So you get this idea about there being multiple ideas in conflict. You've got, who's that guy? Kuhn, I think, talking about science always just evolves to a paradigm shift where we find out everybody was wrong. But I would like to add to that that it's not as bad as people say, because although Newton was proved wrong by Einstein and Bohr and Pauli and stuff to a certain degree, he was right to a certain approximation. His laws are a special case of the general laws, and so that's great. The only reason people could take the next step is because of the first step. It's standing on the shoulders of giants, is what they call that.
Silly.
So you can deny that if you want, but I did not learn about the two-slit experiment.
Let's understand. He didn't take like a hardcore physics course. It wasn't. He was taking a philosophy degree.
No, I did take hardcore. I had to do 5 hour per problem homework in physics. I did full-time physics, just like a physics major, for 2.5 years. And I did math, just like a full-time math major, for 3 years. I could have declared either one of those majors, but I also did full-time philosophy, logic, and philosophical history for 3 years. And I had to finish off my degree, right? And I didn't plan to do any three of those things. I was working my way through school as a programmer. I was planning to continue to do that. Part of me wanted to do creative writing, but I realized I don't want to sell my creative writing to some sort of employer. So I didn't want to become a commercial writer or a copywriter. So I would stick with programming as a way to make money, which I love. But you're wrong. I did take advanced, at least undergraduate, meaning of advanced, upper division physics and math. Sorry. Plus, while I was in college, I worked my way through college and paid for college by programming for NASA Ames Research Center and Berkeley Astronomy Department. And ever since I've been a programmer, and I used logic for that. And I worked after college another 13 years in science and for astronomy, doing astrophysical data processing and tools. And I was exposed to science through that. So, yeah, I actually have work experience, like getting paid for many, many years to work in that area. I do have a basic understanding of it, Gary.
How it all turns out. So he's implying that he had, hard education when.
Because I did.
Well, he probably got less education than I've gotten online, in the sense that I've watched.
Okay.
200 Professor Lewin lectures, and he probably only saw 5 or 10, lectures.
Well, first of all, I've watched more than 5 or 10 Lewin lectures. I've watched a lot of the MIT stuff. Seth Lloyd is a big favorite. I've watched tons of the Susskind stuff, though that's mostly physics on the weekend for people that live in Palo Alto kind of presentations that Stanford does, not classes exactly. But so I think I probably watched as much YouTube as you, and a lot more of where there's homework and you have to solve the equations being described to you to get an understanding of what they're trying to say.
At Berkeley.
Experiment from,
I better let him go a lot more, huh?
Yeah,
This
right. So that's the
take 5 hours.
The Dr. Quantum horseshit video with all of the detector experiments. I didn't even get into that. All the lies about detector experiments.
Well, lies or misconceptions, possibly. I mean, probably I'm not going to endorse that movie in this old video, since the only thing that was good about that movie is it got regular, ordinary people like Gary thinking about these subjects, because I had spent years trying to describe all the quantum weirdness, and it was really hard for people to get it or know what I was talking about.
And how they turned them on, and then when they turned them off, it was magical. Somehow the photons knew they were watching. I mean, all of the storytelling and that horse shit.
Or, some mystical teacher. I learned it from physicists, and my view is based entirely on what the...
All right, so if you noticed, I was saying I didn't learn it from what the bleep. I learned it from physicists. that doesn't make it correct. I'm just saying where it came from. Just like Gary was saying, yeah, mine came from a lot of YouTube. And some of those YouTubes were from physics courses by Walter Lewin or whatever. Fine, you're just saying where it came from. You're not saying you're right because of that. And I'm not saying I'm right just because I learned it from actual physicists. I'm just telling you and disclosing where I came up with my idea of what the standard story is.
Data says. And
Yeah, so again, it's not what the data says, so that's another big lie. It doesn't have anything to do with the real experiment and
No, it's a big truth.
the real data. You evade the real data by making the slits infinitesimally small, which is the same thing as just annihilating their existence altogether.
John Dance, you're not a representative of what people care about, one. Two, if you can't tell by now that I'm talking about what I want, not what you care about, then why the hell are you even here? Are you getting what you care about? No. You think that's an accident? It's not. Come on, guy, grow up. I'm starting to have faith that you could grow up, so do it.
0-point source changes. You can't have any interference because you don't have 2 points that are further enough apart. So it's a huge gimmick to turn the double slit into the single slit just to annihilate a couple of the surfaces, and then we don't have to worry about the complexity anymore because we annihilated them with a fake experiment that nobody actually really does.
when the interpretations of the experiments are hard to comprehend, I go back to that data. That's scientific. Giving
Okay, so he keeps implying that he has the data on his side. So he's done the same thing in the kinetic energy argument, where he just keeps implying these experiments have been done over and over again.
They have.
It's all been done. It's all been proven, and yet they can't post me to a single link. This is what they're posting me links to. 2008.
No, you've been posted to links and found links yourself describing, the old like clay experiments, and you go, those don't count. Well, they did happen. And you go, well, they all are bad then. Well, that's called your confirmation bias. Millions, probably, if not millions, then hundreds of thousands of students in high school have done kinetic experiments, kinetic energy experiments, and momentum experiments. I did, and I'm old like you. And we had the tracks, or probably maybe it was a roller track, whatever. We had those things. We had to calculate based on what we saw and measure it all and do the math. So speak for yourself. You never did it, which is weird because you were in a rich-ass, affluent place that you'd think would have had a good science program. Did you have a good science program and you didn't pay attention, or you didn't have that, or you didn't ever do any of these kind of experiments in high school? And in college I certainly did, but you wouldn't have unless you took physics in college. But in high school you have to take physics, don't you? Didn't you, back in the day? I have no idea what's going on now.
Conversations about this stuff. That's how desperately bad the counter-argument has gotten, is they can't generate a single piece of real good evidence. And this is all this is what they have to resort to, is some sort of, oh no, we already dealt with this in 2008. We made all these great arguments. This is a great argument? No, it isn't. It's not even close to an argument because it's not even on the subject of the argument.
to the empiricism. You, to me, come across like someone saying, "Oh, the Earth doesn't move. You're the Pope. I'm Galileo." And
yeah, well, whatever. Obviously, I think those roles are reversed because you're overtly saying Galileo didn't know what he was talking about, and Descartes didn't know what he was talking about, and Newton didn't know what he was talking about. You're saying they had it fundamentally wrong. Obviously they had it fundamentally right. That's why they got right answer.
No, I believe those guys had fundamental insights. Okay, I was trying to let Gary go. Let's just make a little rule. It's 17 minutes. There's an hour of this. Of course, maybe he gets done with this video sooner than that. He's 59 seconds into a 3-minute video. I'm 17 minutes or 18 minutes into a 1 hour and 6-minute video. I'm going to let him go. I'm going to totally refuse to pause him so that this doesn't take 3 hours. I want to say 5 minutes, but that's probably too long. Let's do it 2 minutes let's do it 2 minutes at a time, but 3 minutes, because 2 minutes, perfect. At 20 minutes, I will not pause before 20 minutes. I will let you watch Gary in all his glory for 2 minutes and 2 seconds.
And it's your hero who didn't have any evidence on his side. It's your hero who didn't do any experiments, Leibniz.
And if the Earth doesn't move, and even if you were to bully me into saying aloud, okay, it doesn't, I would whisper in my breath that it does, because it does. The two-slit experiment is an interesting experiment. It's a real thing. It's been done over and over.
So I keep saying it's been done over and over. Yeah, I know it's been done. I know it creates a pattern. The problem is that when you're describing its function, you're not doing it in the context of those real world patterns. You're just doing it in some vague empty space, okay, where you're not obligated to say, okay, these are your two choices. You got this double slit pattern and you got this single slit pattern. And if you're going to talk about them as what they are. They're really different. They're distinctively different. And you have to acknowledge that fact. And if you're not going to acknowledge that fact, then you're the flat earther. Okay, you're the inquisitioner.
Over. And it needs to be explained. And I've done a lot of work to try to understand it. And if you did that, you would probably be better off.
All right, so this bullshit again that somehow somebody else didn't do work, when it's clearly obvious even at this point, I had seen more two-slit experiments than Piro could even imagine. Okay, in the sense that, I went out on purpose looking into it. And I went looking at all of the two-slit experiment videos I could find. And I went looking for the papers and looking for the different things, anything that would give me more of an insight. So again, this false accusation that somebody else hasn't done the work, or somebody else isn't as smart as him, and he has no evidence demonstrating that he has done more work, or that he has looked at more two-slit experiments. It's just a pile of bullshit. Again, this pretense that he is in some superior position to know better, when there's no evidence of this superior position. There's no frickin' badge on his sleeve saying he's earned it. No, he doesn't have any stripes.
I am not anti-science. I believe in accepting what is empirically shown to be the case.
Okay, keep saying it. Empirically shown. There's no empirical showing. That's the whole point. Where's your empirical showing of kinetic energy? Where are you empirically showing me how NASA uses it to navigate and land on the moon? How are you showing how you've put it on levers and demonstrated that there's no problem that there's twice as much energy on one side, or 10 times more energy on one side of the lever than the other? You haven't made any arguments, and you haven't provided any evidence. Zero evidence to support a single thing you ever say. You just claim the evidence exists somewhere in some void, some dimension somewhere where they actually did the experiment and that you're claiming happened when it didn't really happen.
That is scientific. Your comment on everything has been invented, to me, is just the most biggest bullshit in the world. I just want you to know I don't think that way. I never will think that way.
Okay, so you're just saying I'm going to be a god botherer forever. Fine. But I'm sorry, it has been just invented. In the sense, I don't know the exact context of that phrase, but obviously it's just...
Thanks for the person that mentioned that I was still muted. I appreciate that, but we just lost that last comment. I'm not going to stop. I had said, I waited an extra minute. Okay, I will repeat it. Gary has not shown anything in his system. I gotta watch the mic line. That'll show me if I accidentally have it muted. Anyway, Gary's not shown any of his stuff. He's not done the experiments. He's just started some experiments. And I see Gary complaining a lot about other people not having shown their experiments, but Gary is the one that hasn't shown anything. Now, as far as academic science, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of scientists over the last couple centuries, they say they've done it, and they have data and big tables of data. I've seen these tables of data, and if they weren't collected, then they were invented by some person out to make a plot, and that would be thousands of people doing that. It's pretty far-fetched. That was my point. It's pretty far-fetched that all of those people are claiming they did experiments. Now, Stephen has done some experiments. Gary denies those as well. I show Gary photographs. He denies those as well. It's just like it's easy to say there's no experiments when every time someone says, here was a bunch of centuries of experiments, no, I don't accept those. So those people were making it up. Did they write programs to generate the data, or they just typed in thousands of lines of data? They didn't take data from a Geiger counter. They just typed in what they hoped were random numbers, because again, all of that kind of stuff would be detectable statistically. And meanwhile, another thousands and thousands of separate scientists and mathematicians have been doing calculations on the data and found these things that allowed us to create technologies and act on the data. So what you're saying is super far-fetched. Now, you said that I have the data, and I made clear by the whole, not in this video, but later on, I had gotten these ideas from my science education in college, which had data, yes. It had just claims, and then we had to do labs where we tested ourselves some of the, like, that's why I told you I've done the Michelson-Morley experiment. And that's why I call it that, because in that class, that's what it was called. And I did that with the laser, well, with lasers, not exactly the original. You'd say it was a different experiment, but the same experiment with lasers on a rotating table, so you can use the velocity of the Earth to see if light is bent depending on its velocity in space. And that's why I did that. And that was upper division physics. Does that mean I'm right? No. If it meant I was right in that sense, if I was less of a philosopher, I wouldn't even talk to you, even in the past, because I have gotten bored with your silly theory and your silly theories, plural, and I see it as desperate and unfortunate, because I think you'd be a lot better force in the universe if you were going on about IRV or philosophical representation in Congress. So it's sad, as far as I'm concerned, that you're so wrong and silly.
Contrived. Leibniz just contrived mv squared. It didn't come out of the evidence. It didn't come out of the physical world. It came out of his notion that the physical world needed God in it. And that's all it came from.
No, that's not true. It's easily demonstrated on an air track, for example. And I don't understand why you got confused later on about the 1.4 velocity thing. It was from a particular case. But you can't keep it straight. And if you could keep it straight and you could do the math, you would see what it predicts. That would make predictions that you could then test in the real world, which thousands of people have done, including thousands of high school students. Now, you disagree? Okay, do the experiments. See for yourself. Stop saying someone else should do it because you're just the big brain theorist. It doesn't work that way. If you're the big brain theorist, then sweet talk some experimentalist into doing it. Stephen wanted to do that, but you can't get along because it's more of a getting along with people thing than a physics thing, really.
There's a lot of things that haven't been invented. There's better ways of getting energy. There's more subtle and better ways of getting energy, I'm sure of that.
Okay, he's sure of it. Yet we already know that the amount of difference you can make is minor, because there's only a certain number per square meter, per meter, on the surface of the Earth, or even hitting the atmosphere. The best you can do is like 1,000 watts, per meter of surface. So what's the difference? If we're gaining 70% of that,
Okay, this is random because around this time, I think 20-30% was the top efficiency for solar. And the solar that they send on space probes is different. Maybe that was 40 or 60, I don't know. But if it's 20% for a regular rooftop solar, then that means it can be 5 times, well, it can't be 100% efficient, but there's 5 times as much energy as it's collecting. Surely we could get up to 98% like a photosynthesis does.
You don't have much room for much improvement.
We might be able to control gravity once we understand
All
gravity.
right, so this is all baby talk. So this isn't much of a counter argument, right? We're going to control gravity with what?
I said we might. I don't know that that can happen, but we might be able to, because that's stuff we know it's a known unknown.
Gravity. So he thinks you're going to invent some sort of gun that can undo the fact that what gravity really is a giant heat sink. Matter is a sink. It's heat. It's absorbing heat from the universe, and the only way you're going to create it is create a bigger sink than the other guy has. There's not going to be any magic sink, a magic way to dispose of heat. It's not going to happen. So good luck with that nonsense.
Better and have anti-gravity and more control of gravity. Now, and as for the coin flipping,
So this proves how little real world connected to Earth knowledge.
Gary is saying that the idea that maybe we will be able to have some sort of a anti-gravity or a gravity deflection device or do something with gravity, because wasn't even that specific. That just shows how silly it is, because I know everything. I was born at the perfect time in history. I am the pinnacle of evolution. Evolution exists to have created me. No, Gary, you're in the middle of history. Evolution, you're just a stepping stone. Evolution, unfortunately, had to step through you to get to the next thing it really wants.
This idiot has when he makes a claim about gravity when it's just such a written fact. That there is no simple way to make gravity except compiling mass. And you're not.
Well, you don't know that. That's your theory that you have not demonstrated. You've deduced it because it makes sense to you. Got it.
Not going to just, well, I guess he has some black hole theory. We're going to have little black holes in our wallets. We just pull out our black hole and, create some energy with our magical black hole mass.
you can talk about that more in just a couple minutes into your video so far. So
yeah, so this was another one of his tactics. He doesn't play the video, and then he does this paraphrasing, and then he does it in a bunch of jerky, stupid pieces. The same way he comments on videos. So instead of watching the whole video and then making a comment, which was more sensible, or if you're going to do the cold thing, then do the cold thing honest instead of doing it this way.
I won't go into it too much, but I don't say that proves that things are indeterminate.
So do it this way, where I play the whole hour-long video, and this fucking thing's going to be like 6 hours. Look, I'm in an hour, and it's 23 minutes. So 2 hours to go.
I'm just saying that starts off. Look, we have the...
Well, that's exactly what Feynman said. So now he says he doesn't say it proves it to be indeterminate.
The thread is lost. He just is randomly talking about anything I said. Wasn't there a point?
Now he's pretty much saying that all the time.
Like the point of my video wasn't about gravity. Gravity was just like, hey, who knows what we're going to figure out about future physics.
So, I can show how this opinion has evolved for Pyro, where he was even less willing to play with the ideas of free will, and now he's even more willing to play.
I've always said that the free will is a stupid term. There is willpower, there is will, and denying it is like saying, oh, you can't get across the road and the bumblebee can't fly because of my logical deductions. And I think that's idiotic.
With notions that somehow, the universe isn't clockwork. There's somebody engineering the clock.
No, it's more like the ripples of waves in the ocean than clockwork.
These are indeterminate things. Coin flipping. You can't determine that. You can say, well, if I just had enough...
Yeah, I know it's determined. Right, so he just says...
You know a lot of things that you pulled out of your ass.
I'm going to say, if I had enough evidence, I can predict. That's exactly what determined means. Is the only reason why it's not determined is because I don't have enough information about all the variables I'm putting into the experiment.
So everything is controversial, and when you discuss things for a long time, what you'll find out is your fundamental disagreements. You'll agree, and then you'll get to the part where you don't agree. Now, it's possible that coin flips are determined, but it's a metaphor for quantum events that aren't predeterminable. But as far as we know, coin flips are also not determinable. Our experience is that we can't determine them, and if we throw the coin 1 billion times, it'll be 50-50, and we can never still determine them, even though it's like It's 50-50. After a billion throws, it's 50-50, 0.0001% difference. What's going on? That sounds predictable, but we can't predict the individual one. That's how the universe works. Now you could say, oh, I could predict it. Well, show that, because nobody's ever done that. And believe me, a lot of people, I've been on your side. It's all predictable. Just tell me information that's unknowable and I'll predict it.
It's happening too fast and too small for me.
Okay, so this is getting me upset. So I don't know. Right now we have a half an hour mark where in another 5 minutes we just decide if we can finish this. And by we, I mean me.
To know all the variables. But that's all. It's just ignorance. It's quite inevitable what the outcome is going to be each time I flip the coin. It's just that I don't know all those controlling variables.
Information. Okay, to prove that, because you aren't the first person to say that, to prove that, what do? You break down physics. You break it down and determine things, and you say, look, everything can be determined. I just don't have enough information. But when we broke this...
Yeah, that's exactly the counter argument to your woo physics, is that you're saying every...
So Gary just said what I then said he would have to say. And then he said it again 14 years later. And now he's saying, yeah, that's what it would have to be. Okay, yeah, I shouldn't over pause this simply because my original video seems to be making all the arguments that I'm trying to make 14 years later. That's weird. Why would I have to make the same arguments 14 years later with the same person? Because Gary doesn't think figuring out my position is important. He's got the right position. That's all he needs to know. But me, I'm like, I memorized Gary's position from 14 years ago. And so I do notice if it changed, because then I have to change. Oh, now he thinks this. Now he thinks it's Gary. No such thing. Gary just says, it's all phantasmagorical. Woo-woo. It hasn't changed. He can't even remember whether that I wasn't being coy. In this video, I didn't want to say where I'd gone to school because I thought I don't want this personal information. I don't want to argue from authority. And he gets this all mixed up and has really no orientation in it. Yet he's smart, like from an IQ perspective. I don't think there's any denying that. It's just that emotionally he leads himself astray with false axioms. Kids, that's how this works.
Little place where we can't see what's going on, there's gremlins. You're explaining gremlins. You're saying gremlins did it. So you're abusing the fact that we can't see it to interject a bunch of wooey crap that there's no evidence exists.
What the hell? Gary's site is... Gary is probably this is coming from Gary's site, so... Gary's site... Okay, so I'm at 2543. Let's just reload it and see. Oh, for fuck's sake. What did I say? 2543, right?
There's gremlins. You're explaining gremlins. You're saying gremlins did it.
No,
So
I'm not
you're
saying
abusing
gremlins
the
did
fact
it.
that we can't see it to interject a bunch of wooey crap that there's no evidence exists. And there's certainly no evidence in the big
you can
world.
see how...
So the only place the gremlins exist is in
Do you hear how it sounds like Gary's going, I'm saying it really exists? That's because he's at normal speed. Yeah. Gotta speed him up so he sounds like he's keeping up with shit.
micro world. Isn't that convenient? The only place the invisible man can function is in the world we can't see. Oh yeah, that's
a straw man.
Convenient.
Yeah.
Stuff down to that level, we found things were indeterminate. So
So we didn't find it. So again, he's
Yeah,
arguing
we
as
did.
they've proven this.
We did.
indeterminism.
The rest
They've
of
proven
us, not
something
you.
completely
We
random,
found
bizarre, that's fine, because,
indeterminacy.
like each photon that goes through is
No.
getting bumped or kicked. When you didn't prove any of that.
No, we did.
So again, it's just this obnoxious statement that somehow the evidence proves it.
Well, your
and
statements
there's
are
no
all
evidence.
obnoxious
You
as
can't
well,
even
so
draw wave centers
fair
for
play there.
representation. You can't even be honest enough to put the wave centers where your math says they are. You'll sit there and say no.
You
it's two
didn't-
waves.
you didn't
Now,
do
you'll
the
sit there
math.
and,
Prove it.
Play this game where you just
Prove
move the
it.
center to the surface.
Do
and
the
solve your
math.
So
Do
you
the
argue it
math.
one way, and then you mathematically analyze it another way.
Oh my
And
god,
again,
this
all their
is
math
annoying.
analyzes it as a single slit experiment. They just convert the single slit and the double slit into a single slit experiment to evade having to explain the complexity their math isn't equipped to deal with.
your argument failed. Why don't you admit your argument failed? It went through this whole chain. Well, I just don't have enough information about
Yeah,
the
history of science.
You know, I'm like Laplace. Just give me enough information, I'll tell you whether it's coming up heads or tails. But then,
So do you believe that's true or do you not believe it's true, right? Why are you evading the analysis, which is you have to explain why that wouldn't be factual? That it's clear that if I'm rolling dice, it's about what the dice bounce off of is how they're going to land. If I want to land a coin on its edge, it's going to land on its edge because I know it's going to bounce a certain way that's going to make that possible.
No, because at the quantum level in chemistry, there are random events where any number of 3 or 5 things could happen. You have a chemical reaction or a nuclear reaction, or a radioactive atom is sending off a photon, or a neutron or something. There's a statistical chance of that happening at any given within a given second. But whether it does or not is random. You can't predict the exact moment. And there's been proofs, and you know these. We've been through these arguments, and the bottom line is it's a position other people have besides you. You don't have it. And if you just learned what it is, you'd be able to make a smarter argument against it. But you might also be in danger of realizing you're wrong. And at what point are you going to give up on your wrong theory that you can't demonstrate or prove? You don't ever have to do that as far as I'm concerned. But I do think it's tragic and ridiculous, even on the basis of just what people might call common sense. Even if there were thousands and thousands of hundreds of years of physicists that were stupid, they would all, in all these different countries, just back each other up with the same, like, yeah, I like kinetic energy, so, yeah. Thousands and thousands of people with laboratories and millions of dollars spent on these, billions on these laboratories. And every time they run an experiment, it's like they just do a super selection bias. But you, with no experiments to speak of, you have deduced it perfectly. No selection bias in the pure what makes sense to you. It's just ridiculous. And it's difficult for me to understand why you don't see that or acknowledge that in any way. The unlikelihood that you're right. And I'm saying that with an acknowledgement of, okay, just by the principle of the universe, there's a possibility that in some sense you're right. And if somebody ever did write the math, then, and you keep working on it, you would get to a truth that where science was in a dead end, and you'd make a whole new branch of it. There's a 0.0000 to the thousands of zeros, 0.1 chance of that. Still, you can't acknowledge how unlikely that is. And this is meaningless. So I have to stop. This is why I stopped watching your videos. You're not going to say anything new. You're not going to, I don't know. I thought you going over an old video that it would be different. People can just go watch your video, I guess. I can't do another 40 minutes of this. Okay. Or 30 minutes, whatever. Yeah, Dinah, you're right. It doesn't feel good. Okay.